What's going on, everybody? We are back. It's episode 14 of the Escalate podcast, and this is a very special one for me. I get to talk to somebody that I look up to a ton in the powerlifting world, a role model of mine per se, that being Steve DeNovi of PR's Performance. Steve, if you follow me, you probably already follow Steve. He's been a very influential member in the powerlifting community with his educational content, the creation of Powerlifting Now, as well as him kind of teaching through his YouTube videos or some of his YouTube videos how younger coaches or coaches in general can scale their business, market correctly, all of those kind of things. This episode is really cool because we get to dive into why creating educational content is so important for coaches, and, how it gets the wheels turning for, different types of training methodology and trying different things out with different clients and finding solutions. Because at the end of the day, as powerlifting coaches, what we are problem solvers. That's all this is. We just sit down at a desk, we open an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, and we try to problem solve on how to get somebody stronger. I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this. I think there's a lot of gold in this episode, a lot of things that Steve says that can, definitely inspire me to create more content, as well as, can inspire others as well. Before we do start, though, I want to give a shout out to Kevin Papa and 110%. Kevin is such a passionate member of the powerlifting community, not only for the community itself, helping out at meets across the nation, but also in ensuring that all of the athletes that hit the platform are getting a safe and effective pre-workout in their hands. What I mean by that is all of Kevin's pre-workouts and supplements, whether it be creatine, protein, a carbohydrate supplement, anything like that, they are third-party tested, and they are science-backed formulas. If you do want to support me and the podcast, I do have a code through 110%, that code just being ROB, R-O-B, that you can apply at checkout for a discount. Lastly, I do want to mention that I do have some coaching spots available. If you have ever wanted to work with me, or if you're just interested in seeing how Escalate runs as a whole, I highly suggest filling out that jot form in the description. Shouldn't take more than about 10 to 15 minutes if you're being thorough. And from there, we can hop on an inquiry call and learn a little bit more about each other. With that being said, I am very excited to say that this is episode 14 of the Escalate podcast. It was technically, your first blog post was 7 years ago, or your first article was 7 years ago.
Yes.
Which is wild to think about.
I actually had, so before any of this, I had a thing called Pain-Free Powerlifting, and I had a website that I had some blog posts on before all this too.
Okay, so we can even go further back into 2016, 2015.
Yeah.
That's wild. So I think that's a good way to start this. So you've kind of been known, quote unquote, like as almost the godfather of education content for powerlifters. I mean, with the PR's Performance YouTube, that kind of got popularized, it was popular before, but really got popularized maybe about 2020, 2021. And then before that, writing blog posts, writing articles. And then you just said that you even had your own website called Pain-Free Powerlifting.
Yep. Before PR, this is before I was ever charging anyone, before I was doing anything. I had a website called Pain-Free Powerlifting. That was the first iteration of what I do now. And I have no idea what I put on there, but I had a couple blog posts. Probably no one ever visited it because I didn't really promote it. I think it was more just me, just kind of getting my feet wet to get comfortable to do this. And then, eventually it obviously expanded from there. I had a personal training one too. I forget what the personal training website was. And I wrote some blog posts there as well. And that was almost more for my clients who I was personal training at the time. Then I would actually link them to that and send it on a weekly client email saying, hey, go read this article on 3 foods to eat to help with satiety or something like that.
That's so funny. So you're almost using it as like a communication point, like the website itself. That's hilarious. So to bring everybody into this, you've been doing this for a very, very long time. Like I said, you did your first YouTube video, 10 ways to utilize RP in powerlifting programs. That was 4 years ago. That was 2020. Your first Instagram post, informative Instagram post that I saw, the first post that you made on Instagram, that was why you should squat to parallel, which actually linked to a blog post on Squat to Depth, which is still a company that I kind of see around. So it's cool to see that. And then your first blog post on the PR's Performance page was a different way to look at speed work, which I don't think anybody has really thought about speed work in the past 5 years, but it was cool to look through that because I know 6.5, 7 years ago, that was a major topic. Conjugate was still getting thrown around as like a major periodization thing. And then your first article on, I don't remember what website it
Elite
was.
FTS.
It was on Elite FTS, was alternatives to squat training after overuse injuries. What got you into specifically writing articles for Elite FTS? Because I feel like that's a pretty, I mean, they're kind of the elite status of powerlifting in some ways.
Yeah, I thought they would be too. So yeah, I thought if I could get on Elite FTS, I would be famous immediately. I thought that would be the coolest thing ever. So yeah, I to kind of backtrack a tiny bit, I've always felt that I'm a pretty good writer. I feel like I can portray my own language and how I talk and my personality through my writing. Because literally, if you were to ask me how to teach you how to write, I literally just talk to my computer and I type it. That's how I write. Like I'm just thinking I'm talking into the computer. And so it was always something that I felt like I had a comparative ability, advantage or ability to do. But yeah, I just emailed, like I forget where it is, but you can just, they accept anyone. Anyone can go email Elite FTS right now an article and they either will approve it or deny it. And I was shocked they approved it. I was like, holy cow, I can't believe they approved this. And so I think I wrote like 4 or 5 blogs for them. I stopped doing it for 2 reasons. 1, it took them about 6 months to get back to you. 2, I did not become famous or get anything from it at all. I was completely shocked how little that actually benefited me. I actually found out eventually it benefited me more just to put it on my own website than it did to be on Elite FTS. So yeah, but at the same time though, that was actually somewhat important because you kind of mentioned the speed work thing. Some of my earlier blog stuff, you have to understand that was targeted based on what I was dealing with from a local level. I'm from Missouri, where it was all untested USPA, SPF lifters, conjugate reign supreme. There wasn't really a crowd for tested powerlifting. So I was writing things that were very specifically pertinent to that audience of like, hey, like that's not the only way you can do things. There's other ways you can do things too. And Elite FTS was kind of here's this weak, skinny guy who only has a 370 dots, but Elite FTS makes him legitimate now. And I literally would get that. I would literally get, oh yeah, he writes for Elite FTS, so he's actually legit. And so that was the main benefit I got there, is I got a little bit of street cred with that like untested crowd in Missouri from being on Elite FTS.
That's so funny. Based on what you just said, I actually have 2 questions for you right off the bat. One, you mentioned that you kind of had your content or your blog posts or your educational stuff cater towards the population you were, coaching at the time. And in Missouri, that was untested USPA, SPF guys. As you moved away from that, did you purposefully think to yourself like, okay, I'm going to start writing stuff that's maybe a bit, more towards the USAPL or the drug tested USPA side? Or was it legitimately just a natural thing where you're like, okay, this is what I'm around, it's just a thing by nature, essentially?
I think it's mainly just a natural thing. Like even then, I don't think I was thinking, oh, I have to appeal to untested SPF lifters. Like almost all the content you get tends to spur from interactions you're having in your own experiences within coaching and whatnot. So yeah, I think that just naturally started shifting to what it became for the reason of my experiences and the people I was coaching. USAPL started growing in Missouri. I started coaching more USAPL lifters and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it just kind of naturally happened because it's always been something where I'm just pulling from my own experiences and writing about it.
Yeah, I think that that's something that I've noticed too as I've gotten into kind of the educational stuff is you start to have conversations with people and then all of a sudden you're like in your notes app, writing a small script and, setting up your iPhone to film something real quick. The second question I had for you is very early on. I mean, YouTube was around in 2014, 2015, but you didn't post your first YouTube video until 2020, or at least the first one that's listed on your channel. You might have other ones that you've taken down that I'm not aware of or anything. Did you think that writing blog posts or articles or anything like that, was that an easier step in the door for you to get your ideas out rather than having to set up a camera, edit the video, anything like that? Or was it just like, all right, no, this is what I know to do. This is what's, normal for powerlifting, et cetera?
Definitely, it's just easier to get into blog posts. It's a lot less intimidating. There's a lower barrier of entry. You don't need a camera. You don't need a microphone. Uh, it's much easier to sit there and write and edit and be able to formulate your thoughts, because really when you're making videos, I'm doing the same thing and then I'm going to a camera and speaking what I was basically writing out in the first place. So, as well as, I mean, 2014, YouTube was dominated by like very specific fitness influencers. It wasn't a thing that you really thought you could go on YouTube and make videos and be popular. Like it was the Christian Guzman, the Max Tuning, the Matt Ogus. Like it was just a select people that were actually making it on YouTube. And in hindsight, they probably had like 30,000 subscribers then, and we thought they were like uber famous. And now that's nothing. So I think just the time, like this might be a question you already have, so I might already answer it premature. But I mean, at that point, blog posts were popular. Blogging was very popular in like 2014 time, but at the same time, it was starting to phase out. And that's what I started noticing, is I started noticing blog posts were starting to phase out a bit. And while I was writing blogs, I really felt like that was a way for me to kind of get out there. I always kind of looked at like my marketing strategies. I'm not the strongest. No one knows who I am. But I can comparatively be perceived as more intelligent. Again, I'm battling against SPF coaches in Missouri. Comparatively, just
Relatively speaking.
I'm not even going to say no offense. Take offense. I was more intelligent than them, and I needed to be able to show that in some way. And they weren't putting out blog posts. They weren't putting out important information. So that was my way to connect with people, to say, hey, there's another approach, a more intelligent approach that we can take, and this is how I'm going about it. But with that said, I wrote for Elite FTS. I was writing my own blogs. I would pretty much just like say, hey, go read my blog from Instagram. And I kind of went, okay. And then I kind of realized, why don't I just post the blog on Instagram? I'm telling them you have to now take this extra step to go click something else to then go to the blog. Why don't I just post it on Instagram in the first place? And that's where the Steve essay started. I was like, let me just post my blogs on Instagram. And that's where I'm just going to blog everything. And then I'm sure you can see on my website, I would literally just take that and put it on my website as well, so that it's from Google SEO, if I get any other additional traction, that's awesome. And that worked out super well. I don't want to say I was the first one to do it in powerlifting, but I don't know too many other people that were literally like blogging in captions in powerlifting before I was in like 2017, 2018. And now that's kind of like the mainstay. Like everyone just kind of blogs in their captions now.
Yeah, it's kind of the origin of the parentheses continued in comments.
Yep.
That I always see on a Steve post, where I'm like, okay, let me scroll through the comments. Hopefully somebody like doesn't have one that's super popular, so I don't have to scroll and, try and figure out the chronological order of things. That's super funny. So you said that you mainly just started creating educational content from a want of maybe an educational, or not an educational, sorry, a marketing perspective.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously, I wanted to educate people, but like I said, like I knew my comparative advantage is that I was probably more intelligent than the coaches who I was competing with at that point in my area. And I needed in some way to be able to show that. And it worked. It worked really well, because they were very obvious people who respected the fact that there was more thought and intellect being put into the decision making and the technique and all that kind of stuff, versus just conjugate. That's it. Let's go, bro.
Yeah, versus the aesthetics era of just, watching somebody pull 700 pounds against, reverse band tension.
Yep.
So you had also mentioned that you kind of naturally just phased your way into Instagram and into kind of the, blogging on Instagram kind of things. Is that something that was easier for you from the perspective of, I mean, you mentioned, you just had to go through extra steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of, just throwing stuff up. However, again, kind of with the YouTube stuff that I asked, it's very easy to set up a camera too, and just face that towards yourself and talk through these things. Again, do you think that was maybe a little bit easier? Were you ever in the mindset of, creating these slide posts? I don't even remember if you could post multiple pictures at a time back then. I don't remember if that was a thing.
I don't think you could.
Okay, no. So that answers my question right there.
Yeah. Because I would always just take a picture. Like I didn't even label. Like now, I have like little captions in the video I do to like say, hey, here's the topic, and go read. Back then, it was literally usually just like a video of one of my lifters, and then a super long blog post afterwards. Because there you could only have 15 seconds. You couldn't have multiple slides. So
Very nice. So you do YouTube, you do blog posts, still kind of. I mean, you link to your Instagram on your website, and then you do your Instagram posts. Is there one that you prefer? Is there one that maybe you think is a little bit easier than the other? One that you've kind of done more often that, is just kind of more natural to you? Or do you think it's important to kind of have all of these outlets of maybe like even, I mean, you're not a huge Reels guy. I'm a little bit more of a Reels guy, and stuff. Maybe it's just the smaller age gap I think that we have. But do you have one that just comes a little bit more natural to you? Because obviously, I think you got popularized through the YouTube. Not really, at least in my eyes. That's where I first saw you, was people were linking your YouTube videos or posting your YouTube videos.
So not really. It eventually. So YouTube is what made me, like, in quotes, a famous coach. But YouTube is difficult. That was so difficult. So it is much easier to post on Instagram, way easier. And frankly, if I had only done YouTube and never done Instagram, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today, because Instagram is where powerlifting is basically housed. The community of powerlifting is on Instagram. It's the perfect medium, because when you're doing a 10-second lift, as long as you are making a 70-minute or 70-second reel to show your setup, it's a perfect spot to show your lifts. It works really, really well. That's where the communities kind of join together, and you can be able to access people. Before I ever started YouTube, I had a couple thousand followers. I was getting posts with a couple hundred likes. Like, they were doing really well. I was capped out on lifters. Like, I had a wait list and everything. In my mind, and my eyes at that point, I was doing pretty darn good through Instagram. When I started YouTube, maybe I was getting 100 to 200 views for the first like 10 videos I did. Now they don't have 100 views now, because I started coaching Sean Noriega. And immediately, massive spike in my YouTube channel from that. And that's when it really just kind of blew up. But I could not get people to go watch my YouTube videos. That's why still to this day, I still do it. Anytime I make a YouTube video, I make an Instagram post saying, go watch my YouTube video, which is funny because that Instagram post will get like 200 shares, and all it is saying is go watch my YouTube video. But I had to highly leverage my Instagram to get people to shift over to YouTube to go watch those videos. And now I'm finally at the point, the last 2 videos I made is the first time I've ever not made a post on Instagram saying, go watch my YouTube video, because my YouTube now is completely self-sustaining. But yeah, I had to use my Instagram traffic to drive over there, because I was shocked when I had probably 2,000 something followers on Instagram. I was like, okay, I think I can start a YouTube channel, be popular. And I had 70 subscribers. I'm like, none of my followers on Instagram cared to go over to YouTube. They can be decently separate entities. Like, there are a lot of people on YouTube that are never on Instagram, and vice versa, which kind of shocks me, especially the YouTube part. There's a lot of people that follow me on YouTube and do my stuff, or watch my stuff, that have no idea about the Instagram side of it. With all this being said, you said the easiest to get into?
Yeah. Because I mean, we're eventually going to talk about, this kind of topic of why younger coaches, or why coaches in general, need to start creating educational content to just simply get their kind of gears going. And I'm trying to almost transition into that by asking, which one was easiest for you to do? Was it just back in the day writing the blog post because you didn't have to worry about, transferring them from an Instagram to a blog? Was it the Instagram because it's just right there on your phone? Was it the YouTube? Obviously, I don't think YouTube's the easiest, but maybe it's a little bit more enjoyable. That creative process plays in a little bit.
So Instagram is definitely the easiest, but YouTube is by far the most impactful and helpful. Like, not even close. Like, if I would let's say I'd make 5 Instagram posts, informative content, I probably would have to make 5 posts to get 1 inquiry from a prospective client. When I started YouTube, even before Sean, when I only had a couple hundred subscribers and a couple hundred views, every single video I made, I'd probably get 2 to 3 inquiries for coaching. Because YouTube, you get to show your personality. That's the biggest difference. You could, in sense, on Instagram do that, but I kind of semi-purposely hid behind the PR's performance, and like I never really posted myself. It was always my athletes. And YouTube really just kind of blew it up in the sense that I think it allowed people to connect with me better. I think that people who want to watch longer form YouTube content, that was my niche, and it really pulled them in. Versus Instagram, I might have 20,000 followers, but not all those people are really my niche at this point. My niche is like higher level education of powerlifting content. And a lot of those people have no care in the world to go over and watch a 40-minute video on YouTube. The people that started cycling into my YouTube channel was the exact type of people I wanted to target. And those were also the type of people that had a very high ROI. If you're willing to sit and watch a 40-minute YouTube video, it means you're invested in learning. It means that you're willing to spend on learning. It means that when you learn something, you really value if it benefits you, if all that makes sense. So YouTube, by far, was the best medium. And if you told me right now I could only pick one, I 100% would pick YouTube. But it was by far the hardest to start. And there's a reason why, you have like 2 powerlifting, there's 3 maybe, me, David Wilson, and Bryce Krawcheck. Am I missing anyone?
Not really, not that I can think of. I don't watch a lot of powerlifting YouTube though. So
Yeah.
I think I watch you, and I watch some of the stuff that Marcellus has posted. Like I'll scrub through his stuff sometimes if it gets brought up. But he was also pretty big. Yeah, he was pretty big back then too.
Yes, I should say Marcellus, but Marcellus is a bit different versus me and David. Me and David are strictly informative content, where Marcellus is kind of intermixed with training and whatnot. And Bryce Krawcheck really doesn't do informative stuff anymore. So I mean, like right now, literally, there's me and David. I think that's about it. It's a really, really hard thing to get into, and part of it is because it's a grind. And when you're getting 50 views a video, you've got to be wanting to put out content for other reasons than views. That's why most people are going to quit on it, because you're putting in all this work. You're feeling more vulnerable because you're having to speak in front of a camera, show your face, put yourself out there in a different way. And when you're getting 50 views a video, it's hard to want to keep going. And I just kept going because we're going to get to it for more reasons than just views. Like if I kept getting 100 views, I don't know if I would make powerlifting now level videos, but the videos I started doing, I would have kept doing because I really just enjoyed doing it because it made me a significantly better coach.
Yeah, I really like that point. And for those of you that don't know, Steve actually was in my first ever YouTube video, the only YouTube video outside of a podcast that I've posted on my channel, which took me, when he says time consuming, this is a little bit of a hyperbole because I got caught up in grad school, but from conception of you sending me that clip of you to posting of the video, I think it was like almost a year and a quarter or a year. I'm not saying that it's going to take that long. Normally in the stuff that I make now, whether it be with reels, with the kind of set that I have behind me, or, other YouTube stuff that I'm kind of starting to create now, it's maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks from conception to, finished product or ready to edit product. But yeah, Steve graciously popped his head into that video. If you guys want to check that out, I'll probably link it in the description below. It's really
still fun. That's still one of my best guest parts I've ever done. Like,
yeah, we won't mention what it is. Maybe we'll get some clicks down there so they can see it. We can drive traction up. You had mentioned that, obviously you love doing YouTube, and that was the thing that kind of you would continue to do even if it just kept getting 100 views. When it comes to you finding ideas, obviously you mentioned earlier that it's just a product of the community that you're around. In the past it was SPF, untested stuff. Now it's a little bit more USAPL. I want to ask, because I do this when it comes to content. I sit down and I will take maybe 30 minutes in front of a Google Doc, and I will just kind of blurt out some ideas that are maybe in my head. Or are you more of a guy where you're just around this so much? I mean, it's a full-time job for you, where it's just, it's always around me, so I'm able to just think of ideas kind of day by day.
So it's a bit different with YouTube versus powerlifting now. When I did YouTube, I kind of would make sometimes kind of a list of topics and maybe come back to them. But for the most part, it would just be like, this happened to me with a client. It also happened with a couple other clients. This could be a cool video. I'm going to make it. So there wasn't, it was kind of a spur of the moment. What I was experiencing is mainly what I was doing on YouTube. with powerlifting now though, I mean, I have almost a year to 2 years out planned in advance of the topics, because I've also got to make sure my topics are coinciding with Matt, Sean, and Marcellus, and we're not overlapping, and everything's got to work together. We have certain demands of topics we need to do. So with those, I literally have probably 20 topics and 20 Google Docs for each of them. And it's just one day, something just kind of pops in my head. I start going and jotting down some notes and going and they'll just kind of formulate. Eventually, with one of those topics, we'll get to a point where I'm like, I've got enough info, I think, now that I can start organizing this into a video, and then I'll eventually make a video on it. As well as with powerlifting now, since I'm getting paid, I mean, not gonna lie, there's an incentive, there's a little bit more motivation to do certain topics that are really, really difficult to do when you're getting paid for it, versus on YouTube, I get like $100 a month, which I'll take, but it's $100 a month. But like, for instance, the peaking series I did, the 3-part series, that was a lot of work, a lot of work to put that together. The one I actually will probably get into it soon here when we're talking about some other things. I'm doing one right now on low bar rack position. That's taking a lot of learning. I can't just do that video like based on my own knowledge. I'm having to learn a lot to make that video in the first place to educate people. And so with powerlifting now, I definitely have some topics that I call them challenge topics. Like at least once a year, I want to do a series of videos that like truly challenges me to do something that I don't know if I can make videos on this, but I'm going to take a shot at it. Where that's a bit different than YouTube, where it was more just like, I really want to make a video on this topic because I think I have some good information. It just kind of happens on a spur of a whim. So,
yeah, I really like that point of you saying, you know, you're making videos that are challenging you to learn. They're making you learn things. And kind of what I had reached out to you originally on when wanting to record this podcast was because of a story, or I don't remember if it was a post or a YouTube video or a Powerlifting Now video. I don't remember. But at some point you said that it's important for younger coaches or coaches in general to start creating content simply to start not only their creative process and maybe the marketing side of things, because obviously as you get your name out there and get ideas out there, you're going to build some sort of, you know, reputation and everything. But more so from the aspect of you are just going to learn things. And even if you're creating content that 10 other people have made, you know, or 100 other people have made, it's still going to make you learn these things and communicate them well. Can you dive into that a little bit more for me?
Yeah. So I am confident in saying I have learned more from making content than anything else. And it goes back, I mean, the cliche saying is the person teaching learns more than the students. And that is beyond true. And it's not because like obviously when I'm doing these videos, I know this information. But knowing the information and is different than understanding how to organize it to educate another person on that information. And that's where you start to learn so much more and have such a deeper understanding. Like, for instance, I know how to peak people, like in powerlifting. But when I have to make 3.5 hours of videos teaching others how to peak people in powerlifting, I learned so much more about like the subconscious thoughts that I didn't even realize I was really like having. Like how to organize every little detail of it to the point that like maybe some people listening, like they hear like myself or some other coaches talk about like we have a system and they're like, how do I get to having a system? I have a system because I've made 100+ videos and had to learn and define my system to educate other people to the point that like I have such a good understanding of that stuff that now it's made me a significantly better coach. As well as, like I said, YouTube is scary. I tried to start YouTube in 2019. Me and my wife went to the gym. I recorded. I got scared, and then I did touch my camera again for a year. You're going to put some effort into doing it, and you're going to make sure to do your due diligence if you're going to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. And so, yeah, it really, really, really helps you to force deeper thinking and understanding of the topics that you may already know, but really be able to organize them in a way that, I guess a recall strategy, like for instance, right now, like if I ask you about certain topics that maybe you haven't made content on, you couldn't recall every little thing about it. The topics I've made content on, if you ask me about it, it's like ingrained in my mind now. I can literally tell you every little detail about it because I had to spend hours and hours and hours and hours writing outlines, filming videos, editing, doing all this stuff to get there, that the ability to recall all that information is so much easier for me now.
Yeah, I actually really like that that kind of way of thinking about it, because obviously with me in the motor behavior world and in the motor learning world, we think of recall as like schemas, and I'm not going to dive into, what a motor schema is or any of that. But essentially it's kind of the same thing that you're talking about, where you're looking at creating content and being able to articulate ideas as a skill, like an outright skill. And your quote unquote practice, where, others might think of practice being, in my eyes, I think of practice in the lab as tasks where I reach out in front of me. Like it's that boring sometimes. But in your eyes, it's practice of simply just creating, scripts, or sitting down in front of a camera and actually talking about these things and articulating them. I think that that's one of the biggest things and I haven't had a lot of people come up and ask me about, how to create educational content or anything like that. I'm sure you've maybe had a little bit more, but when they do ask me, for me, it's just a thing of getting the practice done, because it's going to internalize this skill of being able to communicate your idea. Do you have any other advice that maybe you've talked about other people with, or talked to other people with, or really anything like that?
Yeah. So like you said, it's a skill. When I used to make that first 10-minute video of RPE or whatever, that probably took me multiple days, tens of hours. If I made that video now, it would take me less than an hour. I can make a 10-minute. I could write, film, and edit a video in less than an hour if it's that short. Like, it's a skill. You get really good at it. But one thing I want to say is not. I feel I've known for a long time that I had a gift of being an educator. Like, that's always something I felt I was good at, and I understand. I excelled at. I don't know where I mentioned it, but I talked about how, like, I was just I personal trained originally outside of college. I was a good personal trainer, but I was not a great personal trainer. I was a great fitness manager. I was really good at teaching the personal trainers how to personal train. Because I think I have a good understanding of how to take complex information and digest it into an organized manner. And so, kind of getting to your point, there is an art to organizing content, especially long form content. It's actually, I don't think you'll mind me mentioning, after the first year of powerlifting now, me and Matt Cronin sat down, because he's like, I need some advice of how to actually put all this together. Because taking 40 minutes of information and putting it in a way that creates stepping stones of building knowledge in the right, like, order is difficult. And we did that, and his views have gone way up this year. And so the biggest thing I told him is, no matter how dumb you think something is to say, someone else may not know it. And so if you want to make a video on, like, for instance, the one I'm working on right now is low bar rack position. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to be in a low bar rack position. What is a low bar rack position? You have to answer that first. So I have to define what is a low bar rack position. Well, why do I even want to be in low bar? Okay, now I got to describe why I got to be in low bar. Well, if I want to be in a low bar squat, what makes it a good low bar squat? Now I got to decide. Like, you got to take the complex information and literally ask why, like an annoying 3-year-old, until you get to the most base form of what you're talking about, and then start there and go backwards again to create this path to build to the complex topics. And that's the key art there. If you look at every single one of my videos, I do almost the same exact thing. I first talk about what is it I'm talking about, like the most base level information. I talk about why is this important to learn about. And then I start building stepping stones from there. It's almost always the exact same outline that I'm using for every single one.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up Matt, because shout out Matt. Matt's the man. I don't know what it is about him, but his videos from, like, the past, I think, like 4 or 5 months of powerlifting now have been amazing. So we'll give a shout out to him real quick.
So you feel like you've noticed that too? You've seen it?
Yes, I have. And the one thing that I've noticed with his videos is, very early on in powerlifting now, his videos were 20 minutes, 25 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at some points. His videos are now in that 40, 50, 60, even over an hour long. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that, you were able to get, or he was able to get some, not mentorship, maybe mentorship, but some sort of, ideas from you on how to do that. Because the stuff that he talks about, I mean, Matt's kind of a nuanced guy. Like if you look at, like, if you know Matt, he's, he lives in Vermont in the middle of the woods, and he's a powerlifting coach. He has some of these nuanced ideas, and being able to articulate those better has definitely helped me as a coach. I'm sure you watching some of those videos back, it's helped you as a coach. I'm sure it's helped, the hundreds of people that are, subscribed to powerlifting now. So I'm glad you brought up Matt, because that is a change that I've seen. He's done a really, really good job recently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I might exaggerate this a bit, and this is something I did too at one point. Like, at first, you can make a 20-minute video, but if it's not organized, it kind of seems random, and it starts to be hard to follow. You lose interest, and like it doesn't flow well. And once you learn how to get the right flow of things with this long form content, that's where now all of a sudden a 20-minute video turns into 45 minutes, yet it took half the time to like make as a content creator, because everything just flows so well that it's just a stepping stone, and it's really, really easy to follow from the consumer's perspective too. Like, you can actually be able to follow through and understand in a much better way. So that's actually a video I have on my list to do, is how to create long form content.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I do that a lot too in the reels that I do. If you've seen any of them, they always perfectly loop. And that's just like a thing that I like. I think it's cool, like whatever. But what that makes me do is the first sentence I write in the script is technically the last sentence that I'm saying. And I work myself back, much like in programming, whenever we're writing ranges or RPEs or anything like that, we work ourselves back, starting with week 4, 5, 6, whatever it is for that person, into week 3 to 1. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to make sure that by the time I get to that last point, I am fully articulating and fully explaining everything that I need to, albeit I'm doing it in a minute to a minute 30. I think minute 30 is the cap for reels. Well, where you're doing it in an hour to 2 hours at some point. So it's a little bit different, obviously, from the time span perspective. I'm a little bit, trying to get the attention of maybe the brain rot kids. And you're like, hey, I've got the adults over here on YouTube. But it's the same idea. And I think, again, that's a skill that people need to practice. It's a thing that they need to, sit down and actually do. They need to write scripts and do all of those things. And it kind of leads in the next thing that I wanted to ask you about. Obviously, there's only so much content that can be made for powerlifting. And until you're maybe experienced to the point where you have these very small things where you see trends in multiple clients over months of training, or, you've seen things from, a community perspective, you can have a little bit more of these nuanced ideas. But starting off, I think that, at least in my opinion, for younger coaches or coaches in general that just want to get into creating content, I don't see a reason why they can't create content that is already made, putting their own spin on it. So, for example, in the note sheet that I gave you, I give this example of there being a billion how to squat videos, right? Like, if you look on YouTube, how to squat, like, there is going to be so many different results. However, within each of those results, even it was posted yesterday, and the first one was posted in like 2010, there's going to be maybe a little bit of a different perspective. And each of those people that have created those videos, again, like you've mentioned, they've been able to go through that learning process and fully divulge themselves into this, I need to educate others, so I fully need to know the topic. Do you kind of share that belief, or do you have a different view on it?
I mean, everything I've ever put out is just a topic someone else has covered. I mean, the people who tend to eventually like become popular content creators, I mean, the skill they have is, one, they do a good job of organizing things, but two, they bring a new lens or frame to a similar topic. Like, it's incredibly rare something's entirely new that's being put out from myself or anyone else or anything like that. So the biggest thing is just got to give it a try. Like I already mentioned, like if you're putting content out only for self-validation from others, you're probably going to fail pretty quickly, because you're going to put out a lot of bad stuff. I put out a lot of dumb stuff too that no one cared about. You just have to like to do it. Like it was always, for me, no matter if it did well in the sense of like likes and share and views, whatever, it helped me to formulate my thoughts. and help to make me be able to understand topics better, so that maybe in 2 years I talk about the same topic again, but this time I even have a better understanding. So yeah, I think it's intimidating because you see so many people trying to do it. But it's just something that like you got to kind of pull away from the actual social aspect of it and just think of the own personal like self-improvement from it. Um, I think I even mentioned this in the story at one point. Maybe you don't even post it. Just make the content, make the blogs and make videos. And I actually, I told you, 2019, I tried to make a video. I got scared, stopped. I then, I have a private Instagram page for my team. I started making short form videos on there for my athletes only to start to build confidence to then eventually make YouTube videos and post them publicly. Go make videos just for your athletes on a private page. Go make content, just writing slides or posts just for your athletes. They like you. They're not going to troll you and go like talk crap on you. They're going to be nice. So if you want an intimidation free way to do it, go make a private page for just your athletes and make just information for them. Just like I said back in personal training, I had a personal training website where I made blogs just to email to my clients. It doesn't have to be for the world. It can be just for the people you're coaching.
Yeah, a way that I do that, which I'm actually posting a reel today about this, is, and I got the idea from Devin from TSP. I mean, you coach him, Devin Tenney, is making block intro videos. And so at the beginning of each block, I create I just open up OBS, which is like a screen recording software, broadcast software. And I sit down and I talk through the small changes that I've made in their training. And, it can be anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. Upwards of new clients, they get like a 15 to 20 minute video. You do this too, I believe, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think if Devin told you, I think Devin got it from me. So
okay.
Yeah.
So it's gone down the Steve pipeline at this point. But I think that is my personal way of making myself confident in front of the camera, making sure that I'm able to articulate these ideas, because again, from just simply wanting to educate your own clients and not even the entire, population of a powerlifting community or athletes in general, you need to be able to explain why you're changing things. I need to be able to explain to my clients, oh, this is why we're moving you from a pause squat to a competition squat, or from a competition squat to a pause squat. I'll sit there and I'll talk through, okay, I need you to really think about, your center of mass management. And, in this way, I'm really just using it maybe less so for center of mass, but maybe more so that you can control the weight into the hole, because you tend to dive bomb them, stuff like that. Not only does it allow me to, again, be able to articulate it better, but also, and what I'll talk about in the reel is their execution on everything just becomes so much better. Like, I'm not sitting there, saying, hey man, you did this wrong again. Like, please fix it, because they've watched this video that directly tells them this is why you're doing it. This is what you should do. Stuff like that. So I'm in full agreement with you. I'm in the mindset that, no matter what, if you feel like you're getting scrutinized, you should post the content anyways. Or even if you think it's a dumb idea, you should post the content anyways, because even if it is a dumb idea, even if people are going to disagree with you, you are going to learn something from that as a coach. If you put something out there and there are 5 coaches in your comments saying, hey, I don't agree with this, either one, you have to have the balls to defend yourself and sit there and reply to comments and try and debate your way, which is a totally fine thing to do if done civilly. Or 2, maybe you're just wrong. I've been wrong so many times in coaching where stuff just doesn't work for clients. But much like in that aspect of looking at their sheet and learning what not to do for that specific person, you're getting to read comments, albeit now it's in a public way, so it's a little bit more scary, but you're still learning something from it. I don't think there's ever a net negative when you're putting something out there, barring like, a crazy adverse post that you're just like, okay, like, dude, you gotta relax here,
Yeah. To backtrack a tiny bit, and then I'll come back to what you just said there. Dude, I'm happy you brought up the block reviews, because I haven't mentioned this one in a while, but I had someone at one point reach out about YouTube. And I told them, like, all you're doing, just pretend you're talking to your client.
Yep.
Because I think doing those block overviews that I send to my clients, literally the information that you're telling them probably makes a good YouTube video if you just condense it and do like a topical thing. That's all you're doing. Like, it almost gets me into trouble whenever I make any of these videos, all these podcasts. Never once do I ever think about anyone watching it, ever, ever. That really gets me in trouble on two white lights. I really forget that people are going to listen to that sometimes. And I just think about, I'm just talking to Angela, like when in our DMs, and I'm like, oh crap, that's not something I should have said publicly. But you have to just pretend like there is no one else watching this, or just pretend like you're talking to your client. Because if you can make a video for your client, you can make a content video. Like, it's the same exact thing. There's absolutely no difference. If you can explain to your client how to squat, now you're just doing that, except you're just going to post the video somewhere else instead of your client. But then going back to the criticism part, that's a great thing. Because either, like you said, either one, if you defend yourself, it helps you to further understand what you're trying to explain. Because if you're correct in what you're saying, you believe it, and then you have to defend it and be able to rebuttal against different arguments, that only helps you learn even more of why you believe a certain thing. Or two, like you said, if you can't defend it, crap, maybe I'm wrong about a couple things. I need to kind of revisit this, and that's area for growth. I forget, I mentioned it on a podcast with Solana and Natalie when we were talking about imposter syndrome. I have a belief that I don't think imposter syndrome is a thing necessarily. Because when things go bad or you troubleshoot as a powerlifting coach, awesome. I just got an opportunity to learn. Like, that's the coolest part of it. Like, powerlifting is all troubleshooting. So when I don't know something, that is one of the coolest things to me. And where some people say, oh, I have imposter syndrome, I don't know what to do. I think, oh, that's really cool. I found something I don't know enough about. I have the control to go learn more about it. Where I think where you get the imposter syndrome, or you get scared about doing these things, is where when you think you don't know, and then you don't take control of then learning about it, and you have complete control to fix that situation.
Yeah. I suffer from imposter syndrome. You might say that it's fake or not. That's up to you. I'm not holding anything against you. It's saying that, because even sometimes I gaslight myself out of it. But no, yeah, it's. I think it's so important to just get the content out there, and it doesn't matter if it is to shout out somebody else. I forgot their names, like their specific names, but I'm sure you've seen them. It's like Team Blueprint. They've made some like really, like, it looks like David Wilson-esque, edited and lighted and very good content. Albeit I don't think a ton of their stuff is super novel in a way. Like, it's stuff that, again, we all kind of know. Nothing that I've seen from them, and I'm not saying this as like to bash them or anything, but nothing that I've really seen from them has been like, oh, I've never thought of that before. That's a new programming way to do this or that. It's a lot of like, this is center of mass management on squat. This is what you should do before your meet day, which is totally fine. Because, again, back to, kind of what we've been saying over and over and over again, just getting the content out there is going to make you learn something, even if it is something that you've seen millions of people talk about. But to that point, they have very highly produced, reels and posts. And I don't know if they do YouTube or not, but I assume at some point they probably will. I don't think it's super important for people to dwell on that high production value first. I mean, most of your videos, other than the Powerlifting Now stuff, are you talking into the webcam you're talking into right now that I'm sure you bought on Amazon. Like, it is not anything that is super highly produced. You're not, sometimes you set up your camera in your home gym, in your garage, and, you're able to get different angles and stuff when it's appropriate. But for the programming stuff in and of itself, a lot of the stuff that you do is just you talking into a webcam or maybe a camera that's set up on your desk.
I had a dad cam, like one of those little $150 dad cams with a $30 mic. And that's what I used entirely until Powerlifting Now, as well as like the programming stuff is just me screen reporting basically. So yeah, it's a good example to use me versus Blueprint, because I think I'm okay in saying that I brought, even if I was talking about ideas that have already been talked about, I think I brought some novel ideas, which is why people have gravitated and I've done well. And if you put out stuff that's really, really, really good and somewhat new in the sense of the lens of the framing of how you go about it, you don't need high quality. I could have this crappy 720p camera with a $30 mic and people still wanted to watch my videos because the information was so good. Not saying Blueprint's information isn't good, but like you said, it might not be anything new, but they packaged it to be more professional. That was their like how they were able to get kind of that segment of the market is like, okay, if we just package it more professionally than anyone else, it's going to get people's attention. I think another one that was a bit different was that they're the first ones that really got the slides going was data-driven strength. Obviously, they have the benefit that they come from more of an academic background, which helps in the sense of they're going more over like actual scientific studies versus like mine is more just general opinions. But they were the first ones I saw to do really professional looking slides. And that really kind of took off. And then everyone started doing slides and whatnot. So,
yeah. Speaking of this is actually a perfect transition. I appreciate you on that one. Speaking of data-driven strength, they're a perfect jumping point to one of the questions that I had where obviously I think if you've been around personal training or you've been around, athletic training in general, whether it be as, a strength coach or a personal trainer, or just somebody that's in the gym, talking to other people that are interested in this stuff. You've somewhat noticed that the literature, 9 times out of 10, and I'm saying this as somebody that's getting their PhD and is in the field of academia, 9 times out of 10, the literature is always about a year to 2 years behind anecdotal evidence, right? And so especially in powerlifting where there really isn't, we don't have studies on stuff like I talk about with static load progression or different peaking strategies because the population to do an empirical study on that, it just isn't there. You're not going to get 60 people for 3 different groups that are all going to train consistently, right? Like that's just impossible. Hopefully one day maybe we'll have that happen. But do you think that it's important for younger coaches, and maybe this is more on just going out and not making content, but digesting content, do you think it's important for them to go out and actually kind of look at those things? Or is it just a byproduct of them possibly making content, like you said, with, making your how to low bar squat video? I'm sure that you've had to look into some anatomy stuff, right? Or maybe some other things where it's just like, okay, that's how the scapula moves or that's how the humerus moves. And so, I've had to maybe dive through a figure or two on a published paper somewhere. Is that important, or should they be maybe more looking at the mass stuff that maybe Greg Nuckols does with, just, literature reviews and kind of summarizations of that, or just simply stick to anecdotal stuff? And if they need to, go look at it, but it's not a huge necessity.
If you're asking, should someone read a research paper? Absolutely not, because there's no way they're going to understand it. So
there we go.
Never go.
Thank you on that one.
Also, don't go read the abstract because that's not going to tell you anything either.
Nope.
Because I have no idea how to read that stuff. I think mass and data-driven strength are phenomenal. I think that is a great starting point for new coaches. I think because you kind of mentioned it, it's about 2 or 3 years behind, but those coaches are 2 or 3 years behind. It's going to help you kind of catch up to where I still read some of the data-driven strength stuff. I used to subscribe to mass for a long time. I don't anymore. I think there was kind of if this makes sense, there was kind of a point where I'm kind of the 2 or 3 years ahead now. So it's not going to benefit me. But when I first started, it was really, really, really helpful to understand from more of a science background, because I have an MBA in marketing. I have no formal education on this. I needed to kind of backtrack to get a University of Phoenix unofficial kinesiology degree. That's what to understand the actual mechanics and some of the science behind exercise, muscle, biomechanics, all that kind of stuff. I needed to learn that stuff. So 1, I need to kind of go the textbook route and learn some of that. 2, I need to understand kind of the science behind what's going on with what mass puts out and what data-driven strength puts out, because that started to catch me up to where I'm at now, where now I'm kind of in front of that in sense, if that makes, yeah. So I think it's really, really important. Mass and then data-driven strength information would be really, really good stuff to be able to read for newer coaches just getting into it.
Yeah, I agree. I used to subscribe to mass. I was much like you, where I was just at some point, I either couldn't read it anymore because of time obligations with grad school, or I was just I'm not going to read this stuff because some of it was just outright just not interesting to me.
It ends up being the same study 17 different times. I don't need to have the same training to fail. Really cool to read a couple of their research reviews on training to failure, but the 17th one, I don't need it again. That's where I'm getting at. Eventually you kind of learn that. So
now we're looking at it in older adults. Now we're looking at it in younger adults. Now we're looking at it in a diseased population. I've gone through that route, writing grants and stuff. And I don't suggest anybody that doesn't want to go into academia goes down that route. In all honesty, it is hell at some points. It's really fun, but it is hell at some points. Maybe the last thing that we'll talk about, and this is a good kind of wrap up question, is, you've talked about the block intro videos. You've talked about, how creating content has been able to allow you to articulate ideas better and maybe defend them in comments, etc. Do you think that, this is something that you saw as soon as you started making videos or started putting stuff out on Instagram, you almost saw in yourself get better at communicating with your clients? Was it something that, was just kind of transient and just kind of happened, and then one day you were like, oh yeah, that's just who I am. Like I just got better at communication,
I don't know if it made it better communicating with my clients, because really most of the videos are what I already did communicate to my clients, and now I'm putting it into content format. What it did do is give me a lot of confidence in what I'm saying. Like when I'm on a roll making content, I feel like a freaking phenomenal coach. Like I feel like I'm just invincible. Like I'm saying that like kind of arrogantly, but not literal, but like in your head, you feel really, really confident because you're putting out all this information. You feel like you are like on top of all of your thoughts and beliefs. And then there's been periods of time where I haven't done as much. Like for instance, I think it was 2022 or 2023. I kind of like, after thinking I was like really good in regards to like understanding biomechanics and technique, I kind of hit a lull and I realized I haven't made a single technique video in like 8 months. I legitimately feel like I've kind of like lost my touch there. And so I started making more technique videos again. And then boom, it came back and the confidence was there. I was able to I was always able to communicate with my clients, but remember, I going back to the recall thing, it's much easier to recall the things I just made a 30-minute video about than if I hadn't done that. And so it made it really, really easy to recall the information when I was trying to communicate and be very, very confident in it, because I just made a 30-minute video on this. I know everything. I know my beliefs on this information.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I feel the same way, even with the block intro videos. This morning I wrote out 3 blocks, a video for each of them. At the end of it, I was like, dude, you got to ride this high for a little bit when you're, putting out content. You're like, I feel good. Like, I feel like I'm supposed to be in this space now. Like, I feel like I'm doing a good job here. But all in all, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. I think this is a really good conversation that's going to help a lot of people. Before I let you go, I do want to ask if you want to plug anything. I know that you'll probably plug powerlifting now. I don't know if you have any other events coming up or anything like that you might want to talk about, but go ahead, plug away. I'll give you your 2 minutes.
Yeah, really just powerlifting now. Like I said, the videos I put out on there are things that I probably would never put out on YouTube because of how much more effort I put into those. If you think I put into effort in the YouTube videos and you think they're good, I think the powerlifting now ones are significantly better in the sense of the topics I go over. So we literally did that because of mass. We're like, okay, mass is 2 or 3 years behind and people don't really like to read much anymore. The blog thing is kind of like, people like to consume content. I'm going to get long-winded now just to play myself. Did I ever tell you where powerlifting now came from? Like the original origin?
No, I don't think so, but go into it.
So,
I'd love to hear.
Yep. So we did the Corrupted Summit, Marcellus, Brad, and I. And it went great. But kind of the thought process with the Corrupted Summit is the seminar model was dead. Barring you're in strength and conditioning or personal training where you're getting CEUs, no one goes to seminars anymore. People want to consume information in a way that's the easiest possible way for them. And at this point, with YouTube and all the readily available things on the internet, why would you go fly somewhere and pay $300 when I could have just made this into a video? You can watch it at home for free on YouTube. But the Corrupted Summit, we're like, okay, let's do this thing that's more of like an experience. We're going to bring all these power lifters in. We're going to do events. We're going to do a lot of cool things. Like, we got to add more to the seminar model. It went awesome. I thought it was really successful. But even with that, the video we sold afterwards did like triple the revenue the seminar did. And I was like, okay, this was a really cool thing to do. I love that we did it. But the video thing's where it's at. And then I was actually talking to Sean Noriega because he was mentioning wanting to write an ebook. And I'm like, you can? I don't think it's the route to go. I think it's all video content at this point. I think something like mass, but video wise, would absolutely kill it. Knowing how much we sold at the Corrupted Summit seminar, the actual videos of it and what people were willing to pay, I bet it would make a killing if we took the mass model and applied it to video powerlifting content. And then boom, within 10 minutes, we had a group chat and it was done. And that's why it came about, because it was like, I think that's the route. It'll eventually change, but the route is it right now is like, you need it to be very easily consumable anywhere you want it to be. And I don't know if you know this, Instagram, it doesn't really matter too much when you post. Maybe it does for some people. YouTube, it matters.
Oh,
you
yeah.
want to post. You want to post right before lunchtime during a weekday, because the main time people are watching those videos is during lunch break.
Yep. I've watched a many powerlifting now. I've watched a many Steve DeNovi YouTube video eating my ground beef and rice in my lab. It's just kind of a thing that happens, you know.
Yep. And video is important because you can't eat and read at the same time. That's hard. That's going to be difficult. Could do a podcast. That's all right. But podcast, we can't show everything. And then obviously it can't be a seminar because you're at work eating. You can't fly to a seminar that day. So yeah, we had to figure out, how do I get this information in the easiest manner, create the lowest barrier of entry. And that was Powerlifting Now. So
cool, man. Well, I will link probably your Instagram, your website, and the Powerlifting Now stuff in the description. To everybody else, I really, really appreciate you if you made it this far. I think, again, this is a really good discussion. And again, thank you, Steve, for coming on.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you for having me.